Hey, welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to do a shoe battle on two shoes. We're going to look at the Alfred Sargent Moore and the Enzo Bonafe 3966.
Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and our channel we talk about men's dress wear. It's all about footwear, and we talk about unboxing videos, general shoe knowledge, helping you understand the industry and what's happening with your shoes. We look at shoes critically to determine whether or not they're worth the price that they charge. We compare shoe to shoe to understand which one is the best of the same category, and then I interview experts in the field to get their take as well. Check out my playlists to see all my videos. Welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to look at the Alfred Sargent Adelaide and talk a little bit about how it compares to some others. I'm going to actually break this into different videos as I do it, but I'm going to be doing them in a row. One of my watchers actually suggested that I have a categorization where I look at the last and I look at some of the structural things like the sole and things like that separately. Then I look at the quantitative measurements. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that for each of these. So I'm just going to repeat this piece in each of the videos as I compare this shoe to several others. So with that said, here we go. So the Alfred Sargent Moore is an Adelaide. It is a cap toe Adelaide. So Adelaides can come with a cap toe or it can come with a medallion toe. I've never seen them with a plain toe, but I'm sure that that's possible as well. They have heel counters usually, although that is also an option. So like there's an Edmonds Adelaide called the Cornwallis that does not have heel counters, and actually has a medallion, right? But no cap. So there's a lot of different options that you can do. As we look at this particular one, we are going to look at the last first. Now the last is a very important part of the shoe, right? It is the overall shape and is going to give you the overall impression of the shoe when it's on the ground. This is especially important for hole cuts because hole cuts have very little adornment, right? They're just a plain piece of leather. And so the last is going to be what overall is the shape of the shoe. Well, that is true on a cap toe Oxford as well. The cap toe Oxford has a cap, but the vamp here really gets its structure and shape from the last. And so you can have a hole cut shoe or a cap toe Oxford shoe that can look like a clog, or you can have one that looks like a very sleek piece of footwear. So it's important to note. So as we look at the last here, this is a good sweeping last. It has a nice line as it comes back toward the heel. Okay, so the way that it gradually goes back is really good. It has plenty of room here for your foot. So I have a relatively wide foot, and I actually sized down for this in order to be able to get it. So the ball is a little bit on the tight side, but the rest of the shoe, the volume at the front is really, really good for my foot. A little bit of pinching here on my pinky toe, which I may have to put a shoe stretcher in order to accommodate, but so far so good. The heel is nice and tight, so you get that nice splush when you put your foot in. You know, use a shoehorn, right? Everybody says that. I don't always, but what I do is I hold the back of it as I pull it onto my foot, and I do like to have the splush to make sure that my heel is secure, because nothing is worse than having the heel slide on your foot. If that happens, then you get blisters, and that sucks. So, anyway, the other thing that I really like about lasts is the way the toe is like a chisel. Right? So this has this part here, it narrows, and then it has a relatively flat part here. Now it's not a square. Sometimes they'll call this a soft square, and there is a lot of variety when it comes to this in shoes. So as you look at this series of videos with the Alfred Sargent compared to the other one, you'll see that there are some that are more rounded than others, and some that are quite sharp. Now that is also true here, where it rises on the sides. So that can be a really big change in the shoe. So as the last goes, right, you have the way the toe is, you have the sides, okay, And then you have the shape here, the sweeping part. Okay? And then, of course, you have the heel and how well that fits to your foot. Okay? Now, some shoes are going to have a high instep last and some are going to have a low instep last. What does that mean? It means that the amount of leather here can vary. A lot of times what people want is they want a shoe that has very little in the way of a V-gap, okay, where this part just comes together very, very closely. And that can look really good, but a V-gap doesn't mean that the shoe doesn't fit you well. Sometimes if you have no V-gap up here, the shoe can be much too big. So it's a real catch-22, right? I prefer to have it with very little V-gap, but at the same time, if there's no V-gap and they come together, that's sometimes a sign that the shoe is too big. So something to keep in mind as you're looking at sizing and trying to keep it in. Now, the other piece, of course, is that leather does stretch, so you could have a V-gap on day one. I have a pair of CNES Adelaides that when I first got them, the V-gap was about 1.5 inches, and now it's down to almost 0. So again, it depends on the quality of the leather and how much they'll stretch. The higher end shoes stretch less, but they still stretch. It's leather, right? So something to consider. So anyway, so that's the last. So let's look at the sole. This is part of the Alfred Sargent exclusive range and has a really nice sole. It has a beveled waist, has a blind stitch sole. Now, this is also made with an oak bark tanned sole. So the leather is very, very long lasting. I have another pair of these that I've had for about a year, and the wear is about the same as this. So it just wears off the ink that you do when you wear it the first couple times, and then it will just last and last and last and last. This is now, like if you look at a JR sole, that's a double oak bark tanned, that will last longer, but this is also much better than some of your chrome tan soles or something like that is available on some other shoes. Now, how long should a sole last? This is a really, really hard question to answer because soles are really dependent on the way you walk. It's your the surface that you're walking on. It's your weight, the way you walk. Sometimes people have they walk like this. Okay, and so you can wear down the sole here, and it doesn't really matter where you wear the sole down first. Once the sole is worn down in one particular area, it's time to replace it. You can't replace part of the sole. I know some people have done things where they replace only the front half and so forth, and you can do that, and it saves some money, but it really doesn't lengthen the length of the sole because you do want to make sure that you're using the same stitch holes on the welt. Otherwise, you have to replace the welt, and when you replace the welt, that actually diminishes the life of the sole a lot, which is another reason that a lot of people prefer to go to a cobbler instead of sending their shoes to the factory, because the factories have to put so many shoes through the rotation that they'll actually remove the welts and put new welts on because it's actually faster for them. So something to consider. So like when I used to send my shoes to Allen Edmonds to have them recrafted, and it's a fine practice, right? But the shoes can only be recrafted 3 times, and then after that, and I've actually had it where on the second time they were too tight, and it was because the new welt went on and it was just a little bit tighter. So food for thought. But anyway, this is the Alfred Sargent. That is the last. That is the sole. You can see the heel here has this beautiful split here with a lot of leather and a little bit of rubber. That actually helps it wear down slower, which is all about extending the life of the shoe. So that is the Alfred Sargent. The shoe that we're going to talk about is the Enzo Bonafe. And Enzo Bonafe is an interesting one to look at because this is the first shoe that we've looked at in this series that is hand welted, but it's not the last. And what does hand welting mean? Hand welting is instead of gluing a piece of canvas to the bottom of the insole then you sew the welt to, and then you fill that gap that is caused by that canvas, and you fill that with cork, okay, which then the insole, and it's a thinner insole, will then mold the cork to the shape of your foot. Okay, that's one of the great things about having Goodyear welted shoes. A lot of people really like that. Hand welted takes a little bit of a different tack on that. What they do is they use a thicker insole, and then they stitch the welt directly to the insole. And they actually stitch the uppers to the insole as well, so that the welt is not creating that additional pocket of air that needs to be filled with cork. And so the amount of cork that goes onto a hand welted shoe is significantly less. Now, there are many different types of hand-welted shoes. You'll have some that have stitching along the outside. You'll have some that are like this, where it's just blind. You really can't tell the difference between a Goodyear welted shoe and a hand-welted shoe on the outside. Sometimes you can look on the inside and you can see some tension differences and so forth, but for the most part, it is not really visible to the eye. But it can be very, very discernible when you wear it. A lot of men will absolutely swear by hand-welted shoes because they feel as if they break in much, much better because you're breaking in the leather, not the cork. Okay. The other side of that, of course, is that when you recraft the shoe and you put a new sole on it, you don't have to re-break in cork. Your foot just fits into the leather. Right? So another piece there that is a little different. And I don't think that there's a cost difference for resoling a hand welted shoe versus a Goodyear welted shoe. I think that that's pretty much the same because the sole part is for all intents and purposes identical. Now that said, if something is wrong and it needs to be repaired, totally different game. All right. So Enzo Bonafe, this is an Italian version of the Adelaide, and you'll see that the sweeping lines are very, very similar, okay? But if you look at them side by side, there are some differences. Now, this is in a hatch grain versus a smooth leather, so you have to put that part aside. But you'll see that the way that the lasts are, the first thing that you'll note is that the top of the shoe here is actually flatter, okay? And it has a very, very high ridge on each side, but then flat. Where the Alfred Sargent is a little bit rounded and then has the flat on the sides. It's also narrower here, okay? Only marginally so, not significantly. Now, if you look at the U-throat, the U-throat here, this is actually narrower and then going to even narrower. It kind of tapers up. This is much wider and then tapers up to a little bit wider at the end, but not much. It's actually pretty close. So the taper is much, much more significant as this one is going up. As we look at the peaks in the heel, this has peaks that actually are pretty far from the brogue line to the top line, and this actually is touching the brogue line to the top line. All right. If you look at the heels, they're roughly the same size. At least the same height of the heels. As I look at the heels themselves, there is a difference there. The Enzo's heels are longer. And honestly, Alfred Sargent is known for just having very short heels. So let's look at the soles. Okay. Now, the one thing that you'll notice here is that while this has a beveled waist on the Alfred Sargent, this Enzo Bonafe has a fiddleback waist. Right. It is painted differently too, but if you just get beyond the paint, you can see there is a very significant bump here, and that is a difference in structure of the sole, and pretty nicely done as well. Now, we'll talk about the finishing later, but obviously the finishing on a hand-welted shoe can be different, and in this case it definitely is. So that is another component that you should think about. And then I actually have some sole wear already going on the Enzo Bonafe, and you can see the lines starting to show below where they blind stitched it, and it looks like they actually hammered it shut before they blind stitched it so that it's even tighter, which is kind of a nice thing. So that's pretty nice as well. Now the actual heel itself, we talked about the heels being smaller on the Alfred Sargent, but if you look at the amount of rubber, that is a really, really big difference. The rubber on the Enzo Bonafe is very forgiving. They have a lot of it there to attack the wear. So now the rubber itself is a very hard rubber compared to the rubber on the Alfred Sargent, which is a little bit softer to the feel. So that can be a difference as well. So with that is the Enzo Bonafe. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the finishing on these shoes. So we're going to start with the Alfred Sargent. And I think that the Alfred Sargent has a good amount of finishing, but some of it is left intentionally plain. And so that's going to be part of what we're looking at today, is what is left intentionally plain, and what is not. So we're going to start with the pinking. right? And the pinking is the area along the cap, along the edge, along the top line. And I'm going to say that this pinking is relatively fine. I do find it helpful to actually measure the pinking, because sometimes that can help determine whether it's actually finer or not. And this is looking at like 3mm pinking, and it is consistent across the whole shoe. When it comes to fudging, and fudging is along the edge here on the top of the welt, when they take that wheel and they put in that really nice pattern, there is no fudging on the Alfred Sargent at all, not even on the inside. So it's relatively straightforward. Now the sole edge itself, which is right here, okay, this has been finished. So it has a ridge at the top, and it has a ridge at the bottom, okay, and you can feel that. And then when it comes to actually by the waist where it's beveled, the sole has like a rounded edge along the edge there. So it's rounded here, or beveled, okay, and then it's ironed with the groove at the top and the bottom all the way around here. So it's like a 180 iron, and then the rest of that 270 is got that bevel shape to it. Now the heel itself, somebody used a wheel and artistically did a little finishing piece on the edge there as well. As I stated earlier, the heel cap, or the heel counter, is actually in two pieces with a seam down the middle. There is stitching on either side of that seam instead of just having a plain seam, and of course there's the flap over the top as well, which is pretty common on these. The counter actually extends beyond the heel. These heels, as I said before, are actually really short, and usually they that centimeter where it is short is normally taken up by the heel actually going out there. So that's an interesting detail there. I think they wanted to make room for the bevel. That's just my opinion, but again, I'm not a shoemaker. I have no idea in terms of why they would do that, so that's just my assumption in looking at it. And of course, we said on the sole before, the sole is beautiful, has all this, you know, it has the bevel waist, and it has this, you know, blind stitch on there as well. When we look at extras, you know, there isn't a lot of hand stitching. When it comes to the skiving, and what skiving is when you put a toe cap on, and you know they don't actually have the leather going all the way underneath, so the cap doesn't go over it. They're actually joining two pieces of leather here. What they do is they thin the leather so that this gap from the cap to the vamp is as thin as possible. And I'm going to say that they did not skive this extremely thin. When I look at some of my other shoes, which I'll look at in my in the different battles here, I know that is actually thinner. Now, in terms of actually measuring it, I can't tell whether that's actually a whole millimeter of thickness or not. I will tell you that it's thicker than my tape. Okay, so I'm gonna say it's more than a millimeter, and I'm gonna use that as my judge. Right? Is it thicker than the tape? Can I still feel the tape when I put the tape on top of it? And in this case, I do. So that's gonna say I'm gonna say that those edges are on the thick side on the Alfred Sargent. In terms of other pieces, that's the last things we're gonna measure are the density of the stitches. Okay, and this is just a very, very straightforward measurement. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. 4.5 stitches per centimeter across the top here. I always measure at the cap toe on Adelaide's because it's always the same. And then when it comes to the sole, this is normally 3. For the sole, it is, I'm going to say 3.5, almost 4. Almost 4 stitches per centimeter on the sole. So that is the Alfred Sargent. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the finishing details on the Enzo Bonafe. And I alluded to this earlier. The Enzo is a really, really fantastically made shoe and has a lot of really good detail with it. They are 3mm pinking, so the pinking is big. Now the pinking does go up on the top line, but it barely touches over the edge of the top line, so that is different. This is asymmetrical, so the top line on the inside is higher than it is on the outside. It's not very much. You can see kind of where you can see under the shoe tree edge here. and you cannot see under it there. Okay, you can right here, but not at the edge there. So there is a difference there. From a fudging perspective, the fudging on this shoe is absolutely out of this world. And what I mean by that, and I don't know whether or not the camera will focus on this, but the fudging here is perfect. And it goes all the way around, it goes all the way over the stitches. It is so hard to see the stitches, to do the stitch density on this, because they are completely covered in fudging. And there's a couple things that they did, right? Sometimes people have a fudging wheel and they just roll the fudging wheel across the welt, and the fudging wheel is not the same density as the stitches, so it doesn't hide them. This, every fudge line is in line with a stitch, so I can technically just count the fudge lines, and I will get the same result as I will with the stitches, and that's four fudges per centimeter. And then as I look, I can see, if I look very, very carefully, that the fudges are exactly aligned with each stitch. Now again, they do the stitching by hand, and they do the fudging by hand over it. They may even do the fudging before they do the stitching, and they use that as the guide in order to poke the holes. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that it looks very, very good on the shoe. From a skiving perspective, let's see how this one turns out, right? As we look at, as we push down the tape over the edge, this edge looks really, really good on the toe cap. But how does it work on other parts of the shoe? Because it looked like it would be different, but it's not. Everywhere I go, each of the different seams on the shoe is one piece of tape thick. Okay, so that's 1 millimeter. That means they were able to skive down to 1 millimeter all the way around. And I think that that's exciting stuff. I mean, that is a classic thing that they did. Now when it comes to clicking, okay, this is another major issue that gets into finishing. This heel cap is cut in such a way that they did not need to have any seam on it. Not any. So there isn't a big seam across the back, but there isn't a little seam at the bottom either. They cut this perfectly so that they were able to do it, that they were able to handle the tension of lasting it with it on there so that it did not wrinkle. Again, an extra step of quality, and one that I appreciate. I really feel very, very good about that. Now, for the heels, they have the same line as everybody else. It is very well done, so you can feel it. And then, so at the end, right, this has a high stitch density on the sole. It has, I'm just going to do it on the upper because I don't remember doing it. I might have. But it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 on the top, which is standard. So it has 5 on the top. It has 4 on the sole. It has the skiving. It has the clicking. It has the ironwork starts here. It has no top ridge, but it has a bottom ridge. Okay, and then all the way around. Right. Okay, and then it stops right here at the waist. Now this has a fiddleback waist. All right, and it is blind stitched. All right, and I mean, just to go one further, these are stitched by hand. So very nice. Enzo does not disappoint. Really comes across well. So as we look at it comparatively, just a very, very well made shoe, and really think it's going to give in our conclusion, it's going to give the Alfred Sargents a run for their money.
So, in conclusion, sorry, I'm getting tired. You have a hand welted versus a machine welted shoe. Okay, they're inherently different, but the Enzo Bonafe at the price that you see on the website for the Alfred Sargent, the Enzo Bonafe is a better deal. Okay, it's more cleanly put together. It the clicking is better. The skiving is better. The leather quality I think is better. The soles are better. The heels are better. The welt is better. The fudging is better. It's just a better shoe. Okay, and it's hand welted versus Goodyear welted, and I think that has value as well. So in this case, go with the Enzo Bonafe all day long.